Back to the video. Today we're going to go ahead and do another tier list, and in this video it's going to be a best 1v1 Arabia Civilizations tier list for Age of Empires 2. It's been a while since I've made one of these. These are my favorite tier lists to make because I think they're the most relevant. Everyone really plays, I'd say most people play 1v1 Arabia, and so this is a great way to judge the civ's strengths. The last time I made a civilization tier list like this was in May 2022 for Arabia. A lot has changed since then. We've got a couple of balance changes. We've got a few tournaments. The meta shifted a little bit. Players discovered new tactics, new strategies, and so there's definitely going to be a few civs in different spots. So here we are, December 2022, 1v1 Arabia tier list. Let's hop in. But actually, before we get started, check out my secondary YouTube channel, Hera Gameplay, guys. If you want to see pro 1v1 AoE2 content, I'm posting a new video there every day. Check it out. We're over 5k subs. I'm aiming for 10k subs before the end of the year, so be sure to check that out. It helps me out a lot if you would subscribe there, if of course you are interested. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at the tier list now and get started. 1v1 Arabia tier list, a very classic stuff. We're going to start off with Aztecs here. I've got my tiers here, S, A, B, C, D. S tier is going to be like the best civs, A, the ones that are just below it. B is the average. I want most of my civs in B, ideally, if the balance is good. C is for the ones that aren't great, but you could make them work. And D is like, it's very hard to make them work. Alright, so going to hop right in here. Aztecs, debating between S and A for Aztecs. Is always high up on my list. I think I'm going to land them in top of A tier for now. They could bump to S tier later, depending on how I'm feeling. But Aztecs are, generally speaking, always going to be a strong Arabia civ. They have great economy and great units. We all know this by now. Next up, we got the Bengalis. I was back and forth with Bengalis, but I think with the recent buff they got two buffs recently. The monks getting +3/+3 armor, which at first seemed really bad, but actually is pretty solid. Like, that's a really good buff to their monk rush. And then combining that with elephant archers getting a small buff with a cost decrease and more tankiness for skirms, Bengalis are actually pretty decent. I'm going to probably still put them bottom of B tier for now. I actually think the civilization in general is pretty good right now. I would say it's very hard to play, and they don't have a lot of units and a lot of unit options, excuse me. But in general, the civilization is powerful, and they have a couple options that are really good. So if you can just survive that early game, you can be in a great position with Bengalis, and the economy bonus isn't too bad. Getting an extra 2 villas per age is definitely solid. Next up, we got Berbers. Berbers are a fun one. I think they're probably in bottom of A or top of B tier. They're definitely a solid civilization. I think I'm going to put them in... Yeah, I'm going to put them in probably bottom of A tier. I think Berbers is one of those civilizations that's really fun to play, even for beginner players, guys. Highly recommend this civilization because it's pretty straightforward. Like, you have the knights that are really powerful in Castle Age. Your villas move faster, so you don't die to boars. You can escape early pressure very easily, like men-at-arms rushes and archer rushes. And so Berbers generally get off to a good game. They're very consistent. And of course, late game with camel archers, you have an answer to most things with Berbers, which is great. Next up, we got the Bohemians. This is a top tier arena civ, but for Arabia, they're not exactly the strongest, but I don't think they're that weak either. In my opinion, they strike me as a solid mid-tier pick, probably ahead of Bengalis though. I just feel like Bohemians have a good late game and also have a pretty good mid game. Mainly focused around like Arbalest, hand cannon, halberdier. The cavalry isn't spectacular, but you can definitely mix in a couple knights if needed. They also have great monks as well. Yeah, pretty solid overall civilization. I think it's a bit underrated as well. Next up, we got the Britons, and Britons is probably going to go somewhere in A tier as well. I personally think that on the current Arabia on the ladder, it's a little bit too open for Britons to really shine. Britons are really better in closed Arabias, or easier to wall Arabias, more flat ground Arabias. When it's too hilly, Britons tend to lose a lot of their power because if someone gets a forward hill, it's hard to shake them with Britons. They can just camp there with skirms, and it's hard to really ever move out because the map can be so open at times. So Britons are really good as a civilization, but on the current Arabia, they have some weaknesses. And I would say that they die to like knight skirm civs quite often. Not to say you can't beat those civs with Britons, but it's just that it's going to be hard more often than not. But versus mainly archer civs, Britons will just destroy. I think of last thing I'll say about Britons, but I think of Britons as like an anti-archer civ, because like with the extra range, you can beat every single archer civ, or you can force them into elite skirm, which a lot of archer civs don't want to play. All right, moving on, we've got the Bulgarians. Bulgarians are interesting. Probably gonna be a B tier civ. Debating on behind Bohemians or above Bohemians. Definitely above Bengalis though. I'll probably put them above Bohemians. I think that they have a great late game with the Hussar spam. They also have solid infantry, good siege as well. And you have a decent early game as well with like some good aggressive options, free men at arm upgrade, cheaper blacksmith upgrades. So yeah, I'd say Bulgarians are pretty damn good. I really enjoy them. I think they have a big weakness in the sense that they're a bit predictable because early game you have to do something with Bulgarians military wise. So it's pretty easy to play defensive against Bulgarians sometimes. But other than that, they're pretty solid civ. Next up, we got the Burgundians. I think Burgundians has to be an S tier, but maybe top of A tier. I'll put them top of A tier just because the S tier civs are actually crazy. I think Burgundians are S tier if Arabia is a little bit more closed. But since we're playing on an open map or open version of Arabia right now, it's actually a really good version of Arabia. I love it right now. Burgundians sometimes don't get like the full walls and the early defense that they kind of need. It's more of a slower pace civ, and if you get pressured too hard early game as Burgundians, you could fall behind. But in general, it's a really strong civilization here. Next up, we got the Burmese. Now, Burmese, okay. Everyone hates on the Burmese, and they have a really poor win rate. But I personally don't think Burmese are that bad. So I would personally put Burmese... I mean, if it was up to me, I'd put them bottom of B tier, to be honest. I'm going to put them bottom of B tier. Okay, I don't think they're that bad. I think that they have like some of the lowest win rates. I know that. But I really don't think Burmese are that bad. They have a good economy. I don't think they die to archer civs like people think they do. You can just play Knight Skirm versus archer civs and you're going to be completely fine for the most part. Sure, you're missing the second armor upgrade for the skirms, but you know, you don't always need that. You can also play Knight Siege Monk pushes with Burmese. So there's a lot of plays you can do in Castle Age. You also have really smooth eco, and you can start it off by going like men at arm into archers. So you can be the guy playing archers if you want to, you know, put pressure on your opponent. I don't know. I just don't think that Burmese are as bad as people think they are. Yeah, I'll put them here in B tier. In late game, you have elephants that people always neglect, but elephants can be good. Late Castle Age, elephants can be good as well. I don't know. Burmese are decent. Next up, we got the Byzantines. I'd say Byzantines are pretty decent. Probably top of B tier. I used to once upon a time put them in A tier, but I think they're better on closed maps. It's another slow pace civ. I think the more open the Arabia is, the worse Byzantines get. I think right now it's pretty open, but Byzantines will never be a bad civ because it simply has too many good matchups to be a bad civ. Byzantines is like the counter civ. Your opponent invests into archers, you make skirms. If he invests into knights, you make camels, and then later maybe halberdier, stuff like that. Yeah, solid civ overall. It is defensive to start though. It's not like the offensive options like Bulgarians, for example. Next up, we got the Celts. Honestly, I think I was talking about this on stream the other day, but I think that the worst way to play Celts is actually to Huang Rush. And it's not the worst way, but it's not the best way either. It's definitely, I feel like the Huang Rush is tainting the way we see Celts. I might make a video about this in general, but I think the best way to play Celts is to do a small push in Castle Age with economy behind it. Because they have a pretty reasonable late game with siege and infantry, and they have a really strong economy with their Bud bonus. So we actually want to make use of that while making use of our siege push. But if we go all in, although all in is a good strategy in general, it's a little bit predictable with Celts, and it's not, in my opinion, the best way to make use of their strength. So for Celts, I would say that they're probably not the best civilization still, probably in C tier, but I do think the civilization played perfectly can be an A tier civilization. It's just that it's really hard to play. And I think that Huang Rush is like the easy way out. It's like the easy strategy that you can just always do with Celts, but it's not the best way to play them. Next up, we got Chinese, and Chinese is going to be my first S tier civ. Now, keep in mind, this is not the 9-ville start game mode that has been running around the tournaments lately. This is the 3-ville random map, and Chinese are still dominant on that one. So Chinese are going to be an S tier. They still get an amazing economy. They still get really good tech tree, really good options, really smooth developments, and a good late game. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with Chinese in general. It's pretty much the most flexible, most versatile civilization. It's a little bit hard to play for lower elos because of the start, but after that, they're very, very strong. Next up, we got the Cumans. I honestly feel like Cumans are either top of B or bottom of A. They are a very unique civilization because they have access to the second town center, and I think that second town center play in Feudal Age, if played correctly, is insanely strong. But it's also, if played poorly, gonna lose you the game instantly. So it's very hard to judge Cumans. I'm personally gonna put them in top of B tier. Like I said, I think in the right hands, Cumans are actually really strong. But I would say that in most people's hands, it's not gonna really find, good success. And even in top level play, I think that a lot of civilizations can do really well with Cumans. So I would say top of B tier kind of creates that nice balance where it could be really strong, but it could also be quite weak. Depends on how you play it. By the way, I will say you don't always have to go for second TC with Cumans. You can also go for like archers and then maybe a forward ram in Feudal Age to break your opponent's walls, get in with archers and kill him. So Cumans have a lot of options as well in Feudal Age, not just the second TC. Next up, we got the Dravidians. This they've got buffed recently. Elephant Archers got the indirect buffs, the same as Bengalis, and they also got Bombard Cannon. This makes the civilization drastically more playable. Without Bombard Cannon, they're like D tier, they're terrible, because it's just they die to Onagers. But with Bombard Cannon, I would say that they're a little bit better. Maybe even, like, I personally don't mind it. I don't know if I'd put it in bottom of B tier. I'd probably put it top of C tier. It still has a big weakness of not having cavalry, but the Urumi swordsmen are not bad. The extra wood per age is actually very strong of a bonus. Cheaper men-at-arms, cheaper infantry upgrades in general is a pretty good bonus as well. So I think maybe Dravidians can be top of B tier, top of C tier, or bottom of B tier. Depends on how I'm feeling at the end of the tier list, but around here it seems pretty good. Definitely a decent civ though at this point. Next up, we got the Ethiopians, and honestly, Ethiopians, I was back and forth on like how I like the civ, but I feel like it's not the best civ because I think it's really predictable. Like, I'm struggling personally, and let me know in the comments what you guys think about Ethiopians, but I'm personally struggling to find a way to play it that's not predictable because it's really powerful. You have like the power spike with the 100 food, 100 gold. You have the strong archers, so it's like it's so natural to want to go crossbow. But if the other guy just obviously expects crossbow, expects archer opening, they just play with skirms all game. And Ethiopians don't have the economy to switch to knights and like play knights and crossbows. It's too expensive, and they have only a power spike. They don't have a good consistent economy like Britons would get cheap TCs and stuff that can sustain production like that. So I don't know. For me, Ethiopians are strong, but they're a little bit too predictable. I'm gonna probably put them in B tier somewhere. They still have great siege, great units. They even get Hisar, which is not bad for late game. Obviously poorly upgraded, but still decent. So yeah, Ethiopians are not bad, but definitely not insane. Next up, we got the Franks. Franks is probably gonna go top of A tier somewhere. Probably on the Open Arabia, they're better than Burgundians. I'm never gonna really put Franks in S tier anymore for Arabia, just because I feel like with the new civilizations like Hindustani and Gurjara, they completely destroy Franks, and it's just simply too risky to pick Franks right now. If you land a Franks vs Hindustani matchup in high yellow, there's very little chances you're gonna win the game. I mean, you obviously still could win the game, but it's very difficult. On maps like Land Madness, Franks can be a little bit better versus Hindustani, for example. But on Arabia, it's just too easy for Hindustani to just play safe and get the camels. Because their early game is pretty similar. Maybe Frank's slightly stronger, but then the mid game is just way in favor of Hindustani. Same for late game, so yeah, it's too hard to make a good window with Franks. That being said, Franks is good against most other civilizations as well. Next up, we got the Goths, and honestly, Goths are probably gonna go bottom of C tier. I might bump some of these down to D tier eventually. We'll see, but I really do feel like Goth are just simply not a great civilization at all. They still are decent. I mean, I trash on Goths every Arabia's tier list. They still are decent if you get to the composition that you want, but it's generally speaking quite easy to play against them. I think you can put them ahead of Celts if you want to. Depends on the playstyle. Goth have a better late game than Celts, so I can see an argument for that. But I personally would prefer Celts or Dravidians over Goths, me personally. But regardless what you think about Goths, you can't put them higher than like bottom of B tier. There's just nowhere. No way. So yeah, it's around here. Next up, we got the Gurjaras. I think Gurjaras is going to be somewhere at top of S tier. I think the civilization is super broken in random map. I think it has some weaknesses though, honestly. I think the weaknesses of Gurjaras is... Actually, it doesn't have weaknesses. Maybe not. I mean, I think the weakness is playing crossbow camel versus Gurjaras. They have a hard time countering that. They also don't have pikemen, so if you can somehow find a way to get like maybe, I don't know, find a way to put them on a situation where they need pikemen but can't use pikemen, could be good. So they have a couple weaknesses, but they're very vague. Like Gurjaras are just insane versus most civilizations. The Shiramsha riders or Shawarma riders, however you want to call them, are really strong versus archers, and then the camels are really strong versus cav. And so Gurjaras is one of the few civilizations that can counter archer and cav civs with just their stable. They don't need to rely on elite skirmisher, but they have it in case they need it as well. So yeah, Gurjaras are an S tier civ for me right now. A little bit, they got a small nerf with their sheep in the middle. So like 8 sheep in the middle don't give as much, but honestly you can just keep 6 and take 2 to hunt. So it's like, yeah, it's pretty much the same strength. Camels went from 50% bonus damage to 40%, but they're still insane. So yeah, Gurjaras are still S tier for sure. Next up we have another S tier civilization, Hindustani. I don't know if I want to put it ahead of Chinese or behind Chinese. I think I'm gonna put it behind Chinese, just because Gulam did get a nerf. I think, and they also lost Halberdier. So I think Hindustani are really strong. They have an amazing economy, amazing units. Especially their camels. They're actually better than Gurjara camels, which is crazy. So Hindustani are definitely very strong. I just wonder if I'm putting them ahead of Chinese or behind. I'm probably gonna put them ahead of Chinese actually. Yeah. I think even with the nerf, Hindustanis are still insane. You have a great economy. You have great units throughout the game. I can't think of any downside. You have a counter to everything with Hindustani. There's literally no downside to the civilization. And the crazy thing is, Hindustanis actually beat Gurjaras in the one-on-one match because Gurjaras can't handle the stronger Hindustani camels because they have no halbs. So yeah, they literally have nothing versus Hindustani, which is crazy. So Hindustani beat Gurjaras, but Gurjaras have better matchups in general and are the better civ. So fun little matchup there at the top of the ladder. Next up we got Huns, and Huns, as much as I like them, I don't know if I can put them in A tier right now. I mean, they're really good, but every time I play with or against them, they feel a little underwhelming. I feel like the top civs are just a little bit stronger than Huns right now. I'll probably put them top of B tier though. Still a really strong pick. If you like cav archers and cavalry, they're strong. Great economy. Downside is no houses for walling, which could suck, but otherwise pretty good. Following swiftly along, we got the Incas. Incas I probably put pretty high right now, honestly. Not sure exactly where I want to put them though. Probably, probably ahead of Byzantine. I don't know if I would put them ahead of Cumans though. I mean, I personally like Incas. I'm gonna put them, yeah, right here. I think Incas are really solid. They have a clean start. They have really good options. They're really underrated. The Kamyuks are really strong. I don't know. I just personally really like Incas right now. I think it's always a smooth civ to play, you know? So I'll probably put Incas in B tier. A lot of options that you have with the civ. Your economy is not the greatest, but it's not the worst either. So yeah, pretty like mediocre average civ. Next we got the Italians. I think Italians are not bad. They're better than people think they are, but yeah, they're probably going to be weaker than Bohemians on open maps. I don't know if they're weaker than Bengalis. Yeah, they're probably right here. They have really good options in late game, but they're a little slow to get there. They're like Ethiopians. They have good power spikes. But yeah, just not as powerful as Ethiopians, I would say. But they're quite similar as a civilization on Arabia. Next up, we got the Japanese. Japanese, I would probably put relatively high as well. Probably right behind Byzantine or Ethiopian. Yeah, maybe right here. Yeah, just mid B tier. I think they're a good civ. Really strong early game with the men at arms if you want to. You're saving a lot of wood with the lumber camps and mining camps, so I think Japanese are always going to be solid at that. No crazy buffs from them yet, though, or to push them anything higher than this. Next up, we got Khmer. I'm debating if I want S tier or A tier with Khmer. I think the S tier civs are just way too strong, so I think they're probably going to be better than Franks, top of A tier for me for Khmer. I think Khmer are one of those civilizations that if I can play them 10 out of 10 times versus any civ, I feel like I'd always have a chance to win. They have very little bad matchups. They're just not as powerful as the top S tier civs. But they're literally the step below. They're insane, really good civilization, really flexible. A little bit hard to play, I would say. It's hard to understand how and why Khmer are good. But it's really quite a nice civilization. Next up, we got Koreans. I personally really like Koreans as an archer civ. I don't think they're as bad as people think they are. It's again hard to place them. I'd probably place them below Byzantines. I'd prefer to play Koreans over Ethiopians because Koreans are way less predictable. Koreans can play skirmishers, archers, they can play war wagons, they can play siege. They have a lot more options than Ethiopians, and I personally value that as a player. So, yeah, Koreans, not their greatest civilization, but I definitely value them a lot as an archer civ. I also like the towers that they can go for. So, Koreans are going to be pretty decent on my list. Next up, we got Lithuanians. Once upon a time, I rated Lithuanians very highly. These days, I'm not a huge fan of them, actually. I'm probably going to put them B tier, probably below Incas. They're good in the early game, but once the 150 food power spike in the early game falls off, they have very little options. The late game is good, and their lightest is really strong. So I think that Lithuanians have a great late game, great early game, but a terrible mid game. And you're also pretty predictable. Like, you always go for relics, so it's easy to play against that sometimes. I don't know. Maybe my opinion on Lithuanians will change, but for now, it's probably just in B tier. Fun civ to play, though. I do enjoy them. Next up, we got the Magyars. Magyars are probably going to go somewhere behind, maybe ahead of Japanese. It's like Lithuanians. It has a good early game and a great late game, but a terrible mid game, I feel. Magyars are okay, though. If you like cavalry, I think they're fun stuff to play. They're great for beginners, but I think they're a little bit too predictable. Similar to like Bulgarians, they have to play early game scouts or men-at-arms to put pressure to make use of the bonus, and sometimes it's too easy to play defensive against them. Next up, we got Malay. Malay's another underrated civ, honestly. I think it's pretty decent. I personally like Malay. I think that they're a little hard to play, but they are quite powerful. The problem with Malay is that they have a good late game, but the late game is hard to make use of. They have a good early game, or they have a weak early game, but a good mid game, but the mid game is hard to get to, I should say. So they're just a hard civ to play overall, but they're not a bad civ. I think you get rewarded if you play well with them. I prefer Malay over Ethiopians, personally. I'd probably prefer Malay over Byzantines as well. Yeah, I prefer Malay over Byzantines as well. I'll put Malay up here, honestly. Next up, we got the Malians. I'm going to put them below Korean. No, I'll put them ahead of Koreans, but below Byzantines. Yeah, not much to say about the Malians. They're pretty flexible. You have good savings on your wood buildings. Your gold lasts longer, which is nice, but your units are a bit awkward going to late game, so I'm not a huge fan of that. Next up, I got the Mayans, and for me, Mayans are probably going to be right below Aztecs or right below Britons. I'd prefer them over Britons on the open Arabias, though, so I think Mayans are probably going to be right here. I also prefer Mayans over Aztecs, personally. Like me personally, but I think Aztecs are the better civs still. So I put them right here, but these two civs are generally speaking very similar in strength. Next up, I got the Mongols. I'm going to put Mongols in probably bottom of A tier somewhere. You might think that Mongols and Lithuanians are very similar. Both of them get like a good late game and a good early game, but a slow mid game. But I think the mid game for Mongols is much stronger. Steppe Lancers made a recent entry back into the meta, so Steppe Lancers are decent. People have figured out better ways to use them. Mongols in general have always been a very consistent civilization because of the scouts line of sight in the early game. Mangudai in late game are insane. They have great siege. I'm a huge fan of the Mongols, but like I said, in the mid game, sometimes that you could get outpaced by faster civilizations. Next up, we got the Persians. Not sure where I want to put Persians, honestly. I'm probably going to put Persians somewhere in bottom C tier. I'd probably prefer Dravidians over Persians, honestly. And maybe even Celts over Persians. I personally really dislike Persians. I think that the only good way to play Persians on this version of Arabia is to 1 TC push. The problem with Persians, if you get 3 TC, because your town centers work faster, you can't sustain them easily. You need like so many farms to sustain three town center production with Persians. So you might be thinking, okay, you can just idle your town centers a little bit, but then if you idle your town centers, you're not using your economy bonus. So then you're playing without an economy bonus, and that's also terrible. So it feels like the only way to play Persians is to use their economy bonus by just boosting that 1 TC, making it work slightly faster. It's like a 1.3 TC compared to a regular one. And then invest all your resources into military and go 1 TC push. I think in that context, Persians are not bad, but in every other context, it feels like it's too hard to play Persians. The only other context that they're good in is if you're pure booming, but no one will let Persians pure boom ever, so you're not going to get there. Next up, we got the best 1v1 Arabia civ, probably the best civilization in the game right now, Poles. I need to make a video on the civilization because it's one of those civs that didn't really get changed in the past few months, but it went from being a mid-tier, pretty good civ to being the best civilization in the game right now, for top players, that is. And that's just because people figured out how to play them and how to abuse them. It's a hard civ to play, hard civ to master, but once you do master it, they're so overpowered right now. They have a double eco bonus, the farm bonus with the full works, plus the stone mining bonus that gives you gold as well when you mine stone. Those two bonuses in conjunction is so strong, or are so strong, and then combining that with the strong Polish military, they get siege engineers, they get arbalest fully upgraded minus armor, they get winged hussar, which are insane with trample damage, they get cheap cavalier if they get the unique tech. So many options. It's impossible to play against Poles pretty much. It's so hard. If you try to push them, they make a castle and they can mine stone freely because they get gold for it. Their farms are insane. Their late game is crazy. Poles might just be the best civ in the game right now. And I really need to make a follow-up video on Poles because they are, a crazy civilization right now. Next up, we got the Portuguese, and for me, Portuguese are going to be a stock standard mid-tier civ, probably behind Koreans and Ethiopians, and maybe even Magyars as well. Maybe even behind Japanese and Bulgarians, and maybe even behind Bohemians. I think Portuguese are ahead of Italians, though. Yeah, I think they're pretty good with their gold units, but they are nothing special. Just nothing special, pretty much. But they're not bad. Saracens, probably going to be somewhere top of B tier. I think Saracens are probably somewhere near Malay. I'd say probably better than Malay. Saracens are a little hard to play because you need to really make use of the market. But if you can manage that, they're pretty dangerous. And they have a great late game. So if you can get some nice push, boom behind it, set it for the late game, you're going to be golden with the Saracens. Following that up, we got the Sicilians. Ooh, Sicilians got nerfed recently, and a much needed nerf because they were very obnoxious before. They weren't overpowered, but they were definitely obnoxious with their units not taking any counter damage. So now they got nerfed. They're still pretty good though, I'd say. I think Sicilians are probably one of the civilizations that are harder to play, but I think sergeants are very underrated personally. I don't know what you guys think about sergeants. Let me know if you guys have used them, but sergeants I haven't used them too much, but they feel stat-wise really strong. So I think Sicilians are probably quite decent. I'll probably put them ahead of Magyars, honestly. Probably below Ethiopians, but ahead of Magyars, somewhere like that. Slavs, really hate Slavs. Honestly, it might just be the worst civ in the game right now, actually. I feel like Slavs might actually be the worst civ in the game, which is crazy to think about. I prefer it to Goths, personally, but I think objectively Goths might be better, because Goths have better matchups than Slavs. I'd probably still put Slavs ahead somehow, but yeah, I really just hate the civ, and I played it so much lately. I don't know. Maybe that's too biased. I used to think the civ is mid-tier, but it's really not. It needs a buff desperately. It's really bad. It just gets completely outshined by Poles. It has a bad tech tree. The farm bonus isn't spectacular. I don't know. Nothing crazy from Slavs. Keep them there. Maybe they need a buff for sure. Next up, we got Spanish. I used to hate on the civ. I used to say it's the worst civilization, but honestly, conquistadors are, they've gotten some buffs recently. Their projectiles move faster. They're very strong. So I personally feel like Spanish aren't that bad. A little bit too one-dimensional going for conks though. They have a really flexible late game, but their early game is very slow-paced, very one-dimensional. So probably put them ahead of Dravidians. I think I prefer Spanish over all these civs because I think that you at least have a good win condition, good a plan. But definitely not the strongest civ by any means. Have a lot of bad matchups as well. Next up, we got Tatars. Tatars are simply a better version of Huns right now, I feel. You have better power spikes than Huns. Your late game with Keshik options are, is pretty damn solid. Keshik is a great unit. Their Hussar heavy cav archer lineup is really good too. So I personally really like Tatars. Probably put them behind Berbers though. There was a recent stat that showed that Tatars have a really poor win rate in high yellow. I didn't actually see it myself, but I was told about it. I don't really mind that though. I'm going more on feel and what I see in tournaments than win rates, but that is interesting. Next up, we got Teutons. Teutons probably go behind Spanish. They're not a great civilization, but they're not the worst either. I honestly feel like Teutons have some decent options and ways to end the game before gold runs out. If gold runs out, Teutons are screwed. They have a terrible late game, but before that, they're pretty decent. So yeah, I probably put them right here below Spanish. Next up, we got Turks. Turks are another underrated civ for me. I love them on Arabia, honestly. I don't care if they have a bad eco. They have fun units to play with. You get free Hussar, free chemistry, so you're saving resources eventually. They're hard to play, but I think they're really good on Arabia, or really decent on Arabia. I'd prefer Turks over Bohemians for sure. Yeah, right here seems good. Great late game, good savings on upgrades. I think they're a pretty solid civilization, honestly. Next up, we got the Vietnamese. Vietnamese are quite solid, actually. I'm a huge fan of the civ. Probably ahead of Lithuanians, probably ahead of Incas, probably ahead of Huns, actually. Vietnamese might be the top of B tier. They're really strong. Great economy, great units, great late game. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with Vietnamese. They just can't go higher than B tier because they struggle a little versus Mezzo, and they don't have that much power. Like, they're a little bit too, like, standard of a civ, you know? Next up, we got Vikings, and what a fall from grace Vikings was. I feel like it was a combination of losing Thumbring and then other civilizations just getting so powerful that it just kicked Vikings out of the meta. I still think they're a decent civ. I'd probably put them like near Incas somewhere, but it just feels way too easy to play against Vikings these days. I see that I didn't use the D tier, so I'm going to go ahead and throw these 3 civs in D tier, and then throw Bengalis and Burmese down to C tier, and maybe even Italians as well, honestly. So I think I'm pretty happy with that personally. I think this tier list looks quite reasonable to me. So Bengalis, Burmese, and Italians got dropped to C tier. Slavs, Goths, and Persians got dropped to D tier. This makes a lot of sense to me personally. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, guys. Make sure to drop a like and comment if you did enjoy. It helps the algorithm a lot. And yeah, definitely feel free to let me know in the comments if you guys agreed with me, where you disagreed. Show me your opinion, because at the end of the day, this is just my opinion with these tier lists, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.